Hi everyone, Alina from Arcadier here. Today on Inspire, we have Dinuke Ranasinghe.
Hi.
He is our CEO and co-founder here at Arcadier. He is a tech oldie and a payment junkie, previously having worked at Visa and PayPal, which we'll get into later. Hi Dinuke, how are you?
Good, thanks, Eve. Great to be here.
Very glad to have you. So just to start off, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and how you got into the tech space?
Sure. Actually, I turned 47 last week.
Oh, we're sharing your age.
Yeah,
okay.
47. And I realised that I've been in e-commerce for over 20 years.
Oh man.
Yeah, since the late 90s. About 96 I got into it. I actually started life as an engineer working on the construction of oil rigs. I was building oil rigs down in the southern part of New South Wales, and it was great fun. But when that project was over, I was invited to join an implementation team of ERP systems. For those who don't know ERP, it's essentially software which did anything from financial accounting to HR to supply chain, inventory management and so on. And I was chosen for that team because I was young.
Oh.
No reason. I didn't know how to program. I didn't know how to use a computer really, because it was the late 90s who had a computer. Because I was young, they felt I knew computers. And so from that, I joined this team and was deploying software around Australia and in New Zealand. And I learned about supply chain. And that was really the starting point of e-commerce, was around supply chain efficiency. So from construction industry, I moved into consulting and deploying e-commerce systems in Australia for blue chip companies.
Okay.
And I worked with Telstra and big companies. And that's how it all started.
Oh man.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously you worked at PayPal back in the day, and you were actually part of their founding team in Asia Pacific,
Yep.
right? So maybe you can share a little bit about how you saw that progression of, you were one of the founding members
In Asia, yeah.
in Asia, and brought it over here, was part of the regional director, head of strategy and business development. So how did you see it going from a kind of relatively unknown product into what the monster it is today?
I mean, to answer that, you have to go to my job before that, which was at Visa.
All right.
And I was part of the team which was rolling out Verified by Visa. So that annoying system where you have to get a text on your phone to put a code into the computer. Yeah, I was part of that team.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was. But the problem we were solving was around, I guess, authentication. What was the person behind the computer screen, the actual person who should own the card? That we're trying to solve that. And so at that time, there was this little company out of the valley called PayPal, and it was trying to do something that none of us could work out, which was correct buyers and sellers together for payments. And so I was watching it from afar and was saying, oh no, it's rubbish, it won't go anywhere. But I actually thought there was something to it, because they're trying to solve a real problem for consumers. And when they approached me to join them, I jumped at the chance. I guess there was Andrew Pipolo and myself were the first people in Asia for PayPal. We launched in Australia first, and we went from obscurity to the #1 payments company in Australia within 3 years. So from from a handful of accounts to, I think it was 3 million accounts. Here in Australia is a small population of adults of about 8 million. So almost had half of the adult population with a PayPal account within 3 or 4 years. So it was great success. And from that I moved to Singapore, which already had established operations by then, but to accelerate its growth. And I was the head of product for quite some time. And we went into China, got kicked out of China, went to India, kicked out of India, went into Japan. The thing is that we probably got kicked out of as many countries that we went into. And I guess the moral of that is, until someone says no, push ahead. Just keep doing it until someone says no. And they don't say no immediately, they try and work out what you're doing first. Don't wait for the rules, just do it. So that was our secret in growth.
Very interesting. So do you think that that accelerated growth in those 3 years in Australia, along with your deployment around Asia, do you think it was because the market was just primed and ready for such a product, or do you think it was just also a product of educating everyone? And how did you see that progression? Like, what was the hardest bits to get from unknown to then getting kicked out of a country?
I guess the big thing is there was a need for the product, there's no doubt. Unless consumers want it, no adoption will occur. So consumers wanted to have something like PayPal where their details were anonymous, they didn't have to surrender details on a website, That was obviously the case on the consumer side. On the merchant side, the expense of having a credit card facility and the rigmarole of getting one approved by banks was just a pain in the neck. So PayPal solved two sides of the problem. And so there was real demand in the market for it, and that's how you grow. There's real demand on both sides of the equation. And I guess that the problem is for a lot of regulators, they don't know how to deal with you as a virtual company.
Yep.
And so as they're trying to work out the law and how they regulate you, they let you just run. But when the regulation comes, you've got to jump as high as they want and get their requirements implemented quickly. A good example of this was we were the first country to implement what you now call an electronic mandate. Everyone knows today when you sign up for a bank payment facility or go to an online bank to put your details through and push money across, you can do it electronically, put in your details. They're very, very straightforward. But go back to 2003, 15 years ago, that didn't exist. You had to, in many countries, to fill in a piece of paper, have it witnessed at a bank and have it submitted, and then after 3 or 4 days, you got your connection. We were the first country to make that electronic. And we did that because there was actually no laws against it. No laws defining what you could do either. But so we designed a product where you could do it electronically. And I remember at the time, PayPal from North America and the European countries just held its breath to see what would happen in Australia, whether regulators would come down and jump on us. It didn't. No fraud was being committed because in the end, you're talking about people's bank accounts and they're very, very safe with it. And if someone's stealing someone's bank account to pay with something else, it gets picked up very quickly because you know your details of your bank account and what's going on transactionally. It's a great product. And so now look at it today. It's gone around the world.
Very interesting. So there's a couple of points that I want to touch on. One being you as a leader, you obviously as a founding member would, and it being small at the start and then it seeing this huge growth and expansion. What are some of the biggest changes you had to take on as a leader and as driving a product and expansion?
It's actually not so different from the PayPal days. Andrew and I were in a small warehouse office working alongside the eBay folks in Sydney. And when I joined, we were employees 1 and 2 for PayPal. And when I left PayPal from Asia in 2012, I think there were 4,000. So you're going to see these growing pains. You see evolutions in how relationships are formed and created and how things are developed and launched. It's natural. No different to Arcadier. You start with 2 people, Ken and I and Paul. Ken and I locally in Singapore, Paul in Sydney obviously. Ken and I sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Singapore writing things out. What are we going to do? How's the business plan? How do we raise money? And the reason we got an office because we hired our first employee, which was an intern. And that's the only reason why we got an office. We can't actually tell her to come to work every day at Book Cafe in Bukit Merah. So that's how it all changed. But moving from that into actually taking yourself seriously is actually more an evolution of customer response. It's not you taking yourself seriously. You always do because you want to deliver a great product. But when people start using you and you get feedback, and it stings when it's negative, but it's always great because you learn about what they're experiencing, learn about the product you've built, and you also learn more about yourself in terms of what you're capable and incapable of delivering at a time or at a speed they want. So that's all useful. So it's more about progression in terms of evolution of your customer base, evolution of your product in terms of what you want it to do. And that's all it is. And then building teams around that.
How do you think you grew or progressed during PayPal and learning during that whole mad growth period?
That's really interesting because I've been thinking about this in my old age. When I was in corporate, whether it's in management consulting or whether it was in the likes of Visa, you were given a prescriptive set of, rules of how you operated and how you engage with people, how you solve problems, how you launch things or how you develop things. When at PayPal, and more so at Arcadier, you were defining that as you go along. And for many people, I think that would be incredibly challenging because they like structure, they want certainty, they want data. It takes a different personality to actually let that go because you're dealing with heuristics where you don't have perfect information. In many situations, you don't have any information and you're going with gut, right? And you gravitate towards what you think is right, and that comes from a combination of experience, stupidity, and bravery, right? And intelligence. Like it's a mix of what you know is right and what you think is right, and even things that you don't know that you shouldn't know, or it's best you don't know. Make decisions that way, because that's the difference.
Got it. So looking back on all of this, time spent both in corporate and startups, what are do you think that it's important for large corporations or startups to kind of take certain lessons from each other? And what are some of those, tactics you might use from your big behemoth days to, your small startup days? And how do you learn from each experience?
It's I find this question quite funny. Because not ha funny, because I'm not laughing, I'm laughing on the inside. Because I hear a lot the expression of from corporate saying, we've got a lab, or where we've got a startup mentality, and it's crap. It's nonsense. Unless that team is physically outside that space, it is totally disconnected from that company. It can operate in a way that it can launch and fail, and continue to fail, and continue to evolve, and continue to build things, and not have a sense of comfort because they've got a really strong cash flow coming in, because all the bills are paid, because you've got, I guess, a sense of moral hazard, because it's not your money, it's the corporate's money.
Yeah.
You can have innovation in that regard, but in terms of having a startup mentality, no way. As you speak to anyone in a startup, your fundamental thinking is different. It is your money, it is your reputation on the line. It is your career on the line as well, because you take out 5 years. A startup isn't 12 months or 18 months, it's years and years and years. And a big chunk of that is taken out in a startup environment to go back into corporate. You're risking that period. So it's not the same. I think what corporates can learn is probably from startups is knowing how to pivot.
Okay.
Right. So I think when I look at corporates and how they do innovation, and I look at some of the stuff they produce, and it is innovative, but they don't read the tea leaves. They don't understand what's coming back from them, and they don't pivot accordingly. Pivot doesn't necessarily mean a massive course correction. I'm talking about just slight incremental changes in direction, getting feedback. It seems the most obvious thing I'm saying, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often enough that corporates can say they're like startups, or they can emulate startups. It's just not possible. Similarly, startups cannot emulate corporates. It doesn't have the fiscal discipline to get right. There's a stat around what is it? 99% of startups fail.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's a bad idea, because the fiscal discipline in terms of how they approach the problem, it's just not there. They haven't worked out the longevity of what their run rate can do, and then pivot accordingly to make sure dollars keep coming through. You look at Arcadier's history, we've only raised money when we need it. We haven't gone out and raised massive tranches of capital, because keeping yourself lean and having a small team, you actually start doing things faster and carefully. Part of that was by design, part of it also was the market. We have a product which is, I guess there's no parallel to it when we started it. The closest thing was, you're like a Shopify for marketplaces, right? And we still get that comparison. So when you invent something new, or you develop something which is sort of unfamiliar to people, you sort of have to go on your own. If you were copying somebody else, sure, you can prove my business is similar to that one in China, and I can, based on my market dynamics, I could be this big in 2 years by just copying their plan.
Yeah.
Easy way to raise capital, and that's tried and tested. Inventing something new, especially a platform where it takes years and years to develop, takes courage. Shopify is a great example. Shopify, what came about in 2004 from memory, and I'm sure someone's going to correct me. I think it's 2004. They raised, I think at the end of 2010, they had 13,000 customers. Again, someone's going to correct me, but it's a small amount. They raised a big amount of Series A capital that year, and they doubled their customer base in 12 months. And then after that, they raised another tranche of funds, which I think was about 40, then 100, and then there's no such thing as an overnight success with something like a platform. It takes years to build the ecosystem, to get the groundswell going, and then it happens quickly because it's a network effect.
Got it. So from all of this, what would you say is the biggest takeaway that you've brought from your previous experience into Arcadia? Is it fiscal responsibility? Is it something else?
No, I think it's if I hadn't had gone to PayPal from Visa, again from corporate to I guess Arcadia, I think Arcadia would have shut its doors, honestly, years ago. I think what PayPal taught me more than anything else was taking a chance on an outcome.
Interesting.
Take a chance on it. Ken, who you've already interviewed, he was the point man of getting PayPal into China. He lived in China for a year to get us into China. And he was butting his head against the regulators every day, trying to get us across the line. And unless you do it, you can analyse the debt, you can have as many fact bases as you want, get consultants in to give you strategy plans and all sorts of things. Unless you give it a go, don't bother. Really don't bother. I think even at that time we engaged a blue chip consultant, paid $1 million for a deck, a beautiful deck, 150 pages. I think we used one slide from that. Right, and that's what I'm saying. You can analyse it to death, but in the end, until you get amongst it, then there's no point. And I think I learned that from PayPal.
So on that subject, and previously we talked about where, sometimes there are no rules for all this new technology or new ideas, and you kind of just go with it until somebody says no. At what point do you think that, you're facing a lot of obstacles? Do you actually say like, okay, this isn't going to work out? Is it when regulations you just can't jump through all those hoops? Is there like a fine line of when you should be taking a risk, when you shouldn't be taking a risk? Like, how do you follow your gut and know when to go forward?
So I take it further. It's not just regulation. I guess it's also market dynamics. I think that can come from social trends. It can come from economic turns as well. So there's all sorts of market factors you have to consider. I don't know when to say stop. And it actually frightens me. And it's not because I'm scared to stop. It's I don't know what's right or wrong completely. I guess that's a level of cognitive dissonance that I have in terms of you second guess yourself continually. And I think everyone has that. But I think for an entrepreneur, especially moving from startup to growth stage, I don't think it's a question of stop. I think it's a question of, is it right?
Interesting.
Yeah. And if it's not right, again, I don't think it's a question of stop completely, because fast failing doesn't mean just stopping. It just means stopping what you're doing at that time for, I guess, a correction.
Yeah,
or
reassessing.
That's it. Yeah.
All
that
right.
makes sense.
I think so. All right. So moving to, your time here in Arcadia, or your move to, what made you and Ken and Paul decide that marketplace technology was where you wanted to go, and that was what you guys decided?
We sat down and we architected the entire plan and worked out how we were going to take apart the world. No. It was dumb luck, right? It was just a eureka moment, as many inventions are. It was just, we were doing something else and we were looking at payments, and we had a customer that says, we'd like you to do this, can you look at this for us and use your expertise and your knowledge from the eBay Inc. days to do this for us? And at that time I thought, holy crap, there's something here that no one's looking at. And it was marketplace technology, because 3-4 years ago, marketplace was a rage. Everyone wanted to bring about the efficiency of marketplace technology, or the benefits of marketplaces, to their own little corner of the world. But at the time it was expensive. It cost millions of dollars, and it took months, if not years, to do it effectively. And so this little piece of our technology, which we had developed for our, let's call it, alpha stage of our company, that became the most important part, and that was the multi-merchant cart. We developed all sorts of things about pairing phones to payments and all these things that I'm sure they're buried in Paul's computer somewhere. But it was this little piece of technology that we had developed for this one use case. That's very unique in the market, and that's how we did it. It was pure luck.
Just found a little nugget in there
and went to town on it.
How did you guys decide, was it all in agreement that this was it and you just realized it, or how did that conversation kind of go?
It wasn't overnight. It was we started working with, I guess you'd call them, bespoke companies who want to create marketplaces, and they were very lucrative for us. They paid tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so it was great revenues for us. But those customers, I guess, they were entrepreneurs who didn't quite have the plan or the team in place to make their business go in a long way. And during that time, as we're working with them, we turned away hundreds of customers who didn't quite have the same budget but wanted to build a marketplace. And so what we learned from the market was, yes, there are lots of people who want to use the technology. Not everyone's an entrepreneur with $1 million in their pocketbook. So let's look at this new segment, which is totally underserved.
Very nice.
Yeah. So again, it was just through observation.
Awesome. Okay, so why do you think marketplace technology is so powerful? I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who talk about it, and it's a huge buzzword right now.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, what makes it so powerful?
I think I've said this before, and apologize if you're hearing it again. I think when you go back to the history of trade, marketplaces were the most efficient way of bringing groups of buyers and groups of sellers together. If you go back to the village greens in England or Roman forums, it was basically a group of people together. I don't think that efficiency has evolved too much. The interface of that engagement has changed. It's gone from a physical village square to a mall to an online mall. I think that's what's changed, but the actual principles behind it have not changed in thousands of years.
Yeah.
I think that's what's good about it. It's a tried and tested model. We're just bringing it, I guess, more effectively to the market.
Humans still interact
That's it.
the same way in the end.
And it comes down to community, right? It's a community of buyers and sellers, and I guess that's the fundamental of it.
So obviously, online marketplaces are here to stay. So what do you see as the biggest trends, or what do you notice happening on online marketplaces? I know previously we've mentioned, hyper vertical, hyper local, and you mentioned communities. What else do you see happening?
I think you mentioned already that hyper local and hyper vertical are prevalent. I think they'll become more prevalent. If we go back to the early days of Arcadier, one of the first marketplaces on our platform was a marketplace for belly dancers in Berlin. Like, it's the most random thing. Like, the fact that it's Berlin and it's belly dancers, but like, why not Turkey? It's or Greece, but it's Berlin. But that's the power of what we bring to the market. So I think that will continue. There's no doubt that'll continue, which is amazing, because again, you have this level of community of I guess, providing opportunity for small ideas to blossom. I think the future of marketplace is going to move away into a new territory. Not move away, it's going to move into another territory where I think it's going to be corporates who use marketplace technology.
Interesting.
If you think about the efficiency of marketplaces bringing groups of buyers and sellers together, a corporate itself is an ecosystem, and it could be the case where you use marketplace technology as a procurement tool. So again, the buyer technically is one, it's a corporation, the sellers are many who engage with that corporation. Or it could be an intranet of sorts for commerce. So then you've got multiple distribution nodes for a single seller to go across multiple marketplaces, which are, I guess, hyper-local. I think that's where it's going to go, where it moves away from, I guess, innovators and people with ideas to more mature companies which have established processes which can use the efficiency of aggregation for their business. That's what I think would happen.
Very neat. Okay, so that's where you notice and think that things are going. What is an aspiration you have for where you hope online marketplaces will go, or how they can, develop and change?
Goodness me. I would like to see it easier for marketplaces to be created. We've made it easier for the technology of marketplaces to take place. The marketplace isn't easy. To get sellers on board and to get buyers on board is not an easy thing. It takes time. It's not impossible, but it takes time. And that's why I guess hyperlocal and hypervertical proliferate. I would like to see the day where, as a seller, what I'd like to see is, if I join one marketplace, my services or my inventory can get picked up and distributed to thousands of marketplaces on our platform. That's what I'd like to see. That is a true network effect, because Arcadier really is an ecosystem of thousands of ecosystems. So a seller joins one, potentially can join tens of thousands. That is what I think would be really cool.
So do you think that if networks become interconnected, then that means each industry has to have like a monopoly almost of sorts, where you go to one place for one certain thing and you go to another? Or is it within each community you have one of each thing?
Could be
how do you
both.
see it
It could be
working?
both. Like I don't know. It could be both. It could be community based. It could be I'm in this particular area. I want to see everything that's around me, and not necessarily that seller is in that neighborhood, but it's content which is relevant to my position in that neighborhood. So, for example, I'm living in Singapore and I need a pair of binoculars because I need to look at the Formula One, right? That's a relevancy for me being in Singapore. But is there a binocular seller in Singapore? Not necessarily, but there's a seller from Switzerland who can supply that. So the relevancy is more around that use case. It's that interconnection. Not necessarily it's all about Singapore sellers to Singapore buyers. That's what I think would be cool.
Very, very cool. All right, so a couple last questions that I have for you. Since we have you here and you're the CEO and everyone probably wants to pick your brain a little bit, where do you hope to see Arcadia in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now?
In 1 year from now, I would like to see us using blockchain technology. Again, I look at the parallels of e-commerce 20 odd years ago to blockchain today. And 20 years ago, I was in meetings and people say, this is just, technology is rubbish. No one's going to use it. Who the hell is going to buy a pair of shoes online? Well, right, it's laughable, isn't it? But that was the sentiment in many meetings I went to at Visa and at clients when I was a management consultant. It's incredible. And I hear the same type of vitriol today around blockchain. It's just a flash in the pan. It's just nonsense. There's no use cases. Why the hell would we want to put our information into a public domain which is verified? I don't know what's going to happen in terms of how it'll be applied, but what I feel confident about is that the sentiment behind blockchain in creating trust and a decentralized network of trust and, I guess, verification, I think that's something which should be explored because right now e-commerce relies heavily on centralizing information. And so if you're able to actually improve that, it's not necessarily destroying e-commerce, but I think there's an augmentation that happen using blockchain technology, take to the next level. That's what I want to see Arcadia over the next 1 to 2 years. In 5 years' time, I'd want to see Arcadia technology used in mainstream business. Today, if you have a physical shop, a hygiene factor of business is having an online shop, right? And we all know the stats about online shops, right? There are millions of websites, but something like, I think the top 100 sites account for 98% of volume, right? And then the usual suspects, Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, the big e-commerce sites have the bulk of volume. But it's a hygiene factor of knowledge for a potential consumer to know about you, know what you're selling. They may engage with you, they may not, but it's the cost of doing business. I want to see Arcadia becoming a hygiene factor of business. It moves away from entrepreneurs. It still supports them because the technology there is available to support their ideas. That should never ever go away because our fundamentals is about new business. But I want to see a fundamental for regular business too.
Nice. And 10 years?
10 years from now, I think it moves away from not just, I'm using the term away, but I don't mean away, but moves towards the next paradigm, which I think is going from business to, I guess, global community. I'd love to see the technology being used to assist communities in poor countries. Our technology is about creating opportunity. It's about commerce. It's about trade. If we can help countries enable that better for their own communities, I'd love to see that. Again, I don't want to wait 10 years for that to happen, but it may take 10 years for infrastructure and for adoption to take place. But I think we could be part of that story too.
Wonderful. All right, so last question for you.
You said 2.
Yeah.
This is the 3rd.
Question is, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to share with everybody today?
Oh gosh. Don't be afraid to look stupid. I guess that's the biggest thing. It's so easy to stand by the sidelines and watch other people do things, and it's so easy to comment about it in hindsight. Oh, that company failed, but at the time that company was brave enough to try something, and yeah, they may have failed, but they tried something, and that experience in itself is worthwhile exploring as an individual. Don't necessarily go into, I guess, entrepreneurship or using Arcadia for something with the mind that I'm going to make $1 million, I'm going to do this. Do it because you can learn things about yourself. I think that's the one thing I'd give it. Because I learn things about myself every day, good and bad, as Ev can tell you.
Yes, you can do the work, apparently.
Yes.
Or caterpillar. All right, well, thank you so much for letting us pick your brain today.
No problem.
If anybody wanted to contact you, what would be the best way to reach you? Is it LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
All right.
I get people connecting with me all the time. I must get 50 connections a day, and I respond to everybody.
Awesome. We will put his LinkedIn information at the bottom. Again, Dinuke, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
It was really fun having you. And thank you for tuning in on today's session of Inspire. Until next time, be inspired.
Bye.
Perfect.